Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. I am Paula Fontana, Vice President of Strategic Programming Initiatives with the National Black MBA Association, and we are here for another crucial conversation around reaching racial equity. So, just to ground you, the mission of the National Black Association is to provide educational, wealth building, and growth opportunities for Blacks throughout all stages of their careers as students, professionals, and entrepreneurs. We serve over 21,000 members by building on the strength of community. And that community comes in the form of 41 nationwide chapters and over 500 collegiate and corporate partners. So the commitment of our community to reach racial equity is mission critical as it is the baseline to attaining opportunity. So, in order to move that needle, we have called on our partners to not only commit to the difficult and long term work of improving equity within their respective organizations, but with that commitment, having safe space conversations where we highlight best practices that lead to solutions for other organizations as they navigate their journeys to intentional, deliberate steps to widen that road of opportunity for all. So I am delighted to have such a conversation this afternoon with Deirdre Drake, Executive Vice President and Chief People Officer for UScellular Corporation. In this position, she has held since April of 2014. So she leads the human resources and communications organizations and is responsible for delivering integrated human capital solutions that enable UScellular to achieve its strategic objectives. So while she has a long list of accomplishments and serves on boards with multiple organizations, the icing on the cake for me is for this discussion. Deirdre is also a lifetime member of the National Black MBA Association, so her insights will be invaluable. Deirdre, welcome. Thank you so much for your lifetime of service, as well as for joining us for this vital conversation to move us forward.
Thank you so much, Paula. I'm delighted to be here today.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and jump right in. As I'm asking these questions, though, I'm sure you will have questions yourselves. So I encourage you to enter those questions into the chat, and we will get to as many of them as we can during our short time together. So let's level set right now, Deirdre, and just get us started. Tell us a little bit about your journey, how you got here, and more importantly, why racial equity is an important conversation for you to have with us this afternoon.
Sure. Let me first start by thanking you, Paula, for taking the time to engage in this conversation, and to the National Black MBA Association, who, as you mentioned, as a lifetime member, I've had the benefit of personal and professional opportunity through the organization for many, many years. And I don't want to belabor kind of my bio with people, so I won't go into a great degree of detail there. Other than to say the journey that's brought me here today is one that started in Flint, Michigan, quite a while ago, and that I've been working in HR for over 30 years. And you can always just go out and check out my bio on UScellular to get a little bit more about my background and some of the companies that I've had the privilege to work for and those kinds of things. I think what I would say about how my journey has landed me in this place is really related to what I would say has been a fantastic career in HR and being positioned in the function to see the work of organizations and whether or not they've been able to do it well, or whether they've taken advantage of the opportunities they've had to grow in terms of racial equity, and to be able from this seat and others that I've been in to try to influence the work. So that's why it's really important to me. I've come up through corporate America. I started right out of college and have worked in human resources my entire career. So I've been able to see as either being, in some instances, the only or one of very few, the impact that bringing to bear a more equitable work environment can have for corporations and individuals within them.
Right. And absolutely within that space of HR, you've seen the progression over the years. So tell me what strategies you've been able to put in place to increase diversity within your staff at UScellular.
Yeah, it's probably going to be helpful just to let people know a little bit about UScellular. I'd imagine that we have people from across the country who are joining us today, and some of you may or may not be familiar with the company. So UScellular is a wireless provider of services. We are the fourth largest wireless provider in the country. We have about 5 million customers that engage with us on an annual basis, and we have about 5,000 employees in across 23 states in the organization. So we've done a lot of work. I've been the head of HR there since 2014, and we began our work almost immediately, but we really began to do a deeper dive on representation in 2018. So the first step in that was really getting crystallized on diversity, equity, and inclusion as a business imperative, and appreciating that in order for us to make progress, that we needed to get some metrics in place to track our progress. So we know that what gets tracked gets some attention. So we started in 2018 to assess our representation and our internal equity across the enterprise. So we, at that time, identified a number of areas where we needed to invest some energy to move the needle in terms of representation for the BIPOC members of our organization, incoming and existing, and for women, because we, in relation to the marketplace, we had some opportunities. So we first set some goals, and we anchored that work in establishing some leadership accountability. So every step of the way, we've engaged with our leadership. We've let them know how to track their progress. We've partnered with them to establish specific actions within kind of the talent management cycle, because we think about the ability to create equity being rooted in the entirety of the cycle, from acquisition to development and throughout the career progression. In addition to leadership, we engaged our associate base, diverse groups across the organization, to get a deeper understanding of what was challenging them, what challenged them related to development, what processes that they feel may be impeding their ability to maximize opportunity, and what are the things we could be doing with our partnerships to move the needle. So, we put all that in place, and we did and continue to see many of our components in the organization make some improvements, but we knew it was time to expand the work. So we started with individual functional areas, but this year we came through with enterprise-wide representation goals, and we based them on internal equity along with external marketplace data, and we have goals in place that we discuss quarterly executive leadership. So that's some of the plans we've put in place to look at increasing diversity at every component of the talent cycle, Paula. So when you think about acquisition, you think about how we create movement from the entry level to the executive suite in the organization. Right. All of those things are the things that we look at. We know in order to make progress, you can't lose what you get. Yes. You have to get it and nurture it and grow it, and you can't lose it. So we focus on all of those things.
That is incredible. So loved, heard about the metrics, the accountability for the leadership, but then continuing the conversation and making sure that you keep them. So I want to stay there for a second. So people talk a lot about diversity and equity, inclusion, but let's talk about that sense of belonging, which really gets people to stay there, like we were just talking about. So how within your organization do you provide that sense of belonging or support within your community so that the diverse staff that you have are retained?
That's actually an excellent question, and I'll start with the foundational element for us at UScellular, in my opinion, and that's the culture of the organization. So how do we establish a culture that is supportive of everyone that works here, regardless as to how they arrive in the building. We have a cultural model that within UScellular has a name. We call it the dynamic organization, and we view it as a way to help retain associates. It's really I know a lot of companies have cultural models and things that they put on the wall, but what I would tell you about UScellular is that our DO is what we call it, the nickname we've given it. It helps us to retain our associates. It's woven into the way we operate. One critical component of that is associate passion. So when we think about the folks who work in the organization, creating passionate associates, we believe drives a lot of other components of our success. So we try to put things in place that fosters that passion. So one representation of that is our associate resource group. So a lot of companies call them business resource groups or whatever.
Right.
At UScellular, we call them associate resource groups. We've got 8 of them. They make up over 30% of the company. They're focused on creating opportunities and communities where diverse groups can come together to talk about things that are integral to their populations. We challenge them to focus on career development and engagement. We challenge them to work with leadership to identify issues that help us increase advocacy among our associates. And we have networks for them, the ones that are career starters for women, all of the ones you would naturally think about, people with disabilities, veterans, et cetera. We also have that for our Black, Latinx, and Asian American population. So what I love about our ARGs is that, and companies hopefully take advantage of this wherever they are, that they're not just limited to the people who identify in one of those populations, but they're open spaces, right? So all of our associates can learn more about their peers, they can expand their social networks, and they can create solidarity and allyship between groups.
That's right.
So we believe that leads us to creating great degrees of advocacy in the organization. I'm led to think about some of the tougher things that our ARGs help facilitate us talking about. And an example that comes to mind readily is the pullout in Afghanistan. When troops withdrew from Afghanistan, our veterans organization quickly rallied to have a safe forum for our associates to come together and talk about what we knew was going to be a difficult topic for folks who were veterans, for folks who were allies within that group. We did similar types of things during the social unrest for our Black associates last year. So we try to engage in real time on real topics to create a sense of belonging for our associates.
That is amazing and so needed, so that the conversations happen all the time, as opposed to when there's just a need. But then when there is a need, you already have that allyship or the custom of having the conversation, so that it's not unusually uncomfortable. So wonderful. As a reminder, if you have any questions for Deirdre or for UScellular, please put them in the chat and we will get to as many of them as we can. So I want to talk about systemic changes for a minute, realizing that what's needed to really create racial equity within this country, within organizations, is from the top, right? And that systemic change needs to start from the top. So how you, as a senior leader, how do you communicate that need for change, for diversity, and encourage equity within your organization?
Yeah, there's a number of things. We talked earlier about metrics, so making sure that our senior-most leadership is clear about our vision in terms of what we'd like to see for representation, and having the senior-most leadership in the organization embrace that. In addition to that, we have within our cultural model a set of competencies that we use, and we recently included leading inclusively as a competency. So we assess all of our managers on that competence set to help build accountability about what we expect
Hmm.
from our people leaders, and that they have a role in our success as people leaders to create an inclusive environment. We developed and launched that in 2020, so we're still you know, seeing the outcomes, but we felt it was really important to bring to the forefront the need to create an inclusive environment for our leaders, and make it clear that they were going to be assessed on it. We try our best as leaders, I know I do, to model the behavior that I expect in terms of,
Hmm.
looking critically at our processes. Do we do things like ensure that we have diverse interview slates? How do we think about the creation of leadership development and growth programs to make sure that we have the right representation or an opportunity for everyone to engage? How do we create space for our associates to come to the table and tell us what they're thinking? So we've done many of those things,
Hmm.
but what I would say, and especially since the pandemic started, Paula, one of the things I would say is we've really tried to deepen our understanding about equity issues. So we've created forums, a really robust forums. We started in 2020, and we had another one in 2021. We call it the Inclusion Summit. We had over 1,000 live participants, and that's really an accomplishment for us because 3/4 of our workforce works directly with customers, so their schedule doesn't always permit them to participate live. So
Right.
we certainly make those resources available. But having speakers that come and challenge our thinking and hone our skills
Hmm.
is what we shoot to do. So for example, at the Inclusion Summit in 2021, we had an external speaker from Dare to Lead come and talk to us about how to be inclusive leaders. We do all kind of training. We have a training database, a platform where our leaders can go out and get tools that enable them to practice and to put their own behaviors around diversity, equity, and inclusion on the table. So we offer the things you would expect around racial inequity. We've had great receptivity and participation from our associates. We've had over 10,000 courses taken on diversity and diversity topics just in the last 2 or so years. We also have some micro learning that we target to our people managers to make sure that as they think about hiring people in particular, that they're making sure that they are focused on trying to create an equitable environment. So we try to do as much as we can to keep it at the forefront as a
Right.
business imperative for our leaders and for our associates.
That is incredible. So, to put you on the spot, could you give me maybe like one or two nuggets on that inclusive leadership?
Yeah,
What
well,
is it?
yeah. So I was trying to think of her name, and I'm remiss to remember her name, but the speaker is affiliated with Brene Brown. So she just talked about accountability, right? But getting an accountability partner and making sure that if you get off track, or and owning what you need to do to grow, was one of the many
Mm.
things that she talked about. The other piece, and I think I'm sure someone's going to ask me what would I say to other folks, is you got to get clear on where you're trying to go,
Mm.
um, because when you get clear on where you're trying to go, it guides what you do. And I think that was one of the other kind of nuggets of inspiration that she talked about, which is getting grounded as a leader in where you're trying to go, and then you can build your actions accordingly.
That is great. And you mentioned that you have incorporated that also as a something that you track within the organization for leaders
That's
as
right.
well.
That's right.
Fantastic. So it sounds like you guys are doing so many great things. What are things that you could be doing better as an organization to achieve equity?
Also a really good question. So I probably should have started out in talking about UScellular by saying I think we're awesome. Of course I do. I tell the organization all the time that it's a special place, and I do sincerely mean that. But we're not perfect, right? So there's always a continued opportunity to make sure we're checking what we do and that we're staying focused on the analytics that support this work. So benchmarking is a way that we can do that, and not getting caught in just introspection, but making sure that we're staying relevant in the external marketplace. So we do what we can, and we've got some places where we've done really well, and we've got some places where we've got some opportunity in terms of who and what we look to determine our progress. So there's all kinds of indices out there that organizations can turn to. The Corporate Equality Index of best places to work, Working Mother best companies for multicultural women. There's a Diversity Best Practice Inclusion Index. So there's a lot of those. We do well in many. There's others where we've got some opportunity to put some practices in place, whether it's benefits, improvement of our programs, to try to make progress. So while, for example, we've made the Disability Equality Index 2 years in a row, we've still got some progress to make in terms of working mothers. So we look at those external benchmarks to help guide the work that we do internally as well. And there's that needle, fortunately, as those organizations get better at what they're doing, they challenge corporations to get better as well. So we always look to that as one way that we could get better and improve on the work that we're doing.
That is great. So I know that we have many organizations, whether they be corporations or not, who are just getting started in their journey. And I know you mentioned a few of them, but what other tools or pieces of advice would you give to provide as they want to also be successful?
Yeah, this is not work that gets done as a flash in the pan. So I think the first thing I would encourage anyone who's just getting started to do is to realize that this work is not easy, nor is it fast. So while we all would like to go faster, I think the first thing I would encourage organizations or companies or universities that are getting started is to do a pragmatic assessment of where you are, and make sure you're rooted in your foundation of where you are. And then be realistic about where you're trying to go and over what time period. So a lot of times I hear people talk about what I feel are very difficult aspirational goals in terms of speed, mainly perhaps because they don't have, if, for example, you don't have a lot of internal turnover because you have tenured people in your organization, it's going to be tougher to move the needle on that versus if you could go out and just hire a bunch of people from the outside and be deliberate, right? So being pragmatic about what the situation is in your current organization helps you craft your strategy. The other thing I would tell companies and organizations is listen to your people. I am not naive. I appreciate that UScellular is really unique in that our associates talk to us and they tell us what they're thinking, probably in orders of magnitude that are different than what I've experienced in other places in my career. But that insight is helpful. Whatever your business model, if it's the people that are closest to the customer, closest to whatever the work is that's being done that drives delivery in your organization, talk to those people. The next thing I would say is make sure you got the buy-in of senior leadership. If your senior leadership isn't bought in, folks will see through that in about 30 seconds. So you have to make sure that your senior leadership is on side with what you're trying to do, because you won't be able to move the needle without that. And I think the last thing I would say to companies is don't get overwhelmed. It's a lot, but tackle it in pieces, and don't try to do it with a magic bullet. This work is too complex for that, and to give it the right service, you have to tackle all of the component parts.
That is so important. And I love what you said at the beginning about it not being fast sometimes, and also maybe not linear. So there may be some ups and downs, but as long as you are continuously talking to your people, then you will continuously move forward. So thank you so much for that insight. We have a question from a viewer. What would you recommend, or would you recommend having a mentor and accountability partner as one person, or would you suggest having one individual mentor and an individual accountability partner?
I think the role of an accountability partner, as it pertains to this work, may be different perhaps than a mentor. So I would say, gather the resources wherever you can. If there's I know that I've leaned on the leaders in my on my team that run DE&I. One of the things that I recognized early on is that I only knew so much. I work in HR, but I'm not an expert in this space. And to be able to craft a strategy that enabled us to make real progress, I needed to get members on my team who knew what they were doing. So
Hmm.
so those people in a lot of ways, the team that is my DE&I team or UScellular's DE&I team, they serve as accountability partners because they let me know uh, when we're on track, when we're not on track. They let me know what we need to be doing, to your earlier point, where we may be losing ground. Sometimes we get comfortable in how we keep the right focus. That
Right,
group does that. But along the way, I've also had mentors who are folks that I look to try to aspire to be and do what they're doing corporately, because I feel like they're components of their diversity strategy that are able to be replicated in the environments where I've worked. So different needs for different people. I'd say your accountability partner kind of has to be internal because they need to see what's going on, or I'd recommend they see what's going on. Or your mentors can come from uh, internally or externally, I would say.
got you. Thank you for that. So, when I think about some organizations, there may be a tendency when it comes to diversity, maybe you see a lot of diversity at the entry level. And then as you continue to advance, less and less so. So, do the benchmarking tools that you talked about also help you understand what the demographic representation should look like at level, and if there's any strategies that change um, as you move up the corporate ladder, if you will?
So I don't know that I would say is the benchmarking. I think what I would say is there's measurement that is available that enables you to take a look by level. So I think that's a very good question, because like I talked about, what we look at, it kind of feels like a pyramid. It's actually a visual
Hmm.
use that we at external availability, and say, against that external availability, where do we want to be as an organization in terms of representation of women and BIPOC? And how do we look in terms of what needs to come into the pipeline through acquisition to try to achieve those levels of representation? How well do we hang on to the talent that we have in the organization, so we monitor what comes out the back
Yeah.
end? So how do you retain people? So you can get external availability that helps you set the targets, and we look at those targets at every level. So we look at those targets at the entry level, the first line leader level, the director level, and the senior leadership levels. So you should be able to know what the availability is. That information is available. And then once you establish your targets, the targets that work for your corporation in terms of representation, you can track that at every level, because it is important to say, I can't get to example, I'm gonna make a hypothetical. I can't get to parity with women if I don't have women in the levels below to
Mhm.
enable career progression when I promote 60-70% of my people from within. So you have to take into consideration things like, what typically do you do to develop people and how do they grow from within? And you have to have feeder pools that support the odds of you having the representation in place. So all of that kind of information is, I would say, specific to companies, but the external availability data is census data. It's available.
Got it. Thank you. And thank you so much for your candor, for all of these tools that you have given us to move forward. And thank you, US Cellular, for your partnership.
Thank
We,
you so much, Paula. It's been
of
wonderful.
course, my pleasure. We also appreciate all of you all tuning in and engaging with us As you continue to have these conversations around racial equity in your respective organizations, commit to be the change that you want to see. And I promise you will keep moving forward. Until then, take good care of yourselves.